Look, had to get on my grind, ain't got no time to be making excuses. Success in my mind, I hit up Sean when I land up in Houston. Him and Gentry told me, AOG, when you chasing your dreams, gotta take that risk, so I stake my chips, put it all on me. It is what it is, put all the chips all on me, yeah. I don't talk too much, put the money up all on me, yeah. I'ma put 10 bands, 100 bands, millions all on me, yeah. I'ma put 10 bands, 100 bands, millions.
So ADHD is one of the most talked about and misunderstood conditions in the world today. I feel like every high performer has some version of it. And so it'll be good to break it down. But today, I just wanted the goal to be almost a masterclass on ADHD. That way, by the end, anyone listening can understand what it is, what causes it, and how you can thrive if you have it. So you have dedicated your career to ADHD. So introduce yourself and tell us the story of what got you into it.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. So, I'm Jheri South and super excited to be here, by the way. Thank you for having me. I have ADHD and I was diagnosed later in life. So I was almost 40 when I was diagnosed, and I have 7 neurodivergent children. And there's a lot to my story. So going back, my kids, we didn't know that we were a neurodivergent family, and my kids were having some struggles. ADHD, there's a high comorbidity rate, meaning if you have ADHD, the likelihood that you'll have a second condition is 60%. So it's actually more likely that you will be struggling with something else in addition to ADHD.
Anxiety, depression.
Autism,
OCD.
depression, OCD, exactly. And OCD does run in my family. So my kids were starting to struggle. I have 7 of them, and as they were becoming teenagers, it's like, oh, what is this? Some symptoms were emerging, and so I was trying to get them help, taking them to doctors, psychiatrists, therapists. Anyway, my son he was suicidal, and he got to the point where he was attempting suicide, and he ended up in a behavioral health facility. Well, while this is happening, I'm a coach. I'm a behavioral coach, and I'm primarily working with women. I was a single mother of 6 children for a long period of time, and I wanted to help women because that was one of the most difficult periods of my life. And I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm just going to do this forever. Well, at the same time, the women that I'm working with, they're asking me, will you please do a class for teens? Because they loved what coaching was doing for them. And I was like, no way. I am not working with teens. My son hates me. That sounds terrible. But finally, I did this pilot program. It was an in-person 4-week program. I had about 10 to 15 teens, and it was the first thing that helped my son. And I couldn't believe how much it helped him because he honestly didn't like me very much at the time. But I could hear him coaching his friends through his bedroom door what he was learning. And as this is all going on, my sister also she's looking for help for this binge eating disorder that she has. And she gets diagnosed with ADHD. And we're all kind of shocked because obviously we don't know that much about ADHD. We're still stuck in the stigma of it's hyperactive boys, right, who can't sit still. In fact, I don't know if you know this, it's really interesting, but like years ago, because the DSM is constantly, changing and being updated, we're on DSM-5 now. But back in the day, they didn't even believe that girls could have ADHD. That's how much we've learned. So she gets diagnosed with ADHD, and now my entire family starts getting diagnosed with ADHD, myself. And then that's when I realized my kids have ADHD, and some of them also have autism. And it just changed my life. So I'm already a coach. I'm not thinking, oh, I'm going to learn about this and become an ADHD coach. I am just trying to help my children who are struggling. So I start seeking out some of the top specialists in the United States. And one of them was Dr. William Dodson. I actually took a camera crew to his house for 4 hours. I just interviewed him. I asked him, because some of the clients I have, now that I'm working with teens, they have ADHD. I mean, they are struggling because their self-confidence is damaged. They feel broken. Their parents are frustrated with them. They're having behaviors at school. And so I'm asking all of these questions, but I'm really just trying to save my family. And I learned so much from him. He was the first one who ever started writing on RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria, that we could get into later. But But I just went down this rabbit hole, and that's what ADHDers are good at. They hyper focus on something and they will master it. And so that's really how I got into specializing in this, because there's so much misinformation out there. 93% of psychiatrists today don't know how to properly treat ADHD, according to Dr. Dodson. And so I started having a lot of success with my clients and parents saying, I've learned more from you in 20 minutes than I have from my last 5 doctors. And it's just because I was working directly with the doctors and the specialists who had the right information.
For someone listening who may not fully understand ADHD, what's actually happening in the brain, or how can you describe it for people that don't know what it is?
Okay, so this is my non-scientific
Okay.
way to describe it. But first of all, just from a scientific level, I mean, it's like there's this molecule, we'll say it's at the top of the brain. And when you have ADHD, your brain's just burning through that much too quickly. So this is why, for example, some choose to take stimulant medication, because there's 4 molecules in stimulant medication. 3 of them do nothing for ADHD, but one of them will mirror that molecule that we're burning through so quickly, and it stabilizes the brain so that we're less impulsive. We can sit and focus and pay attention. And so that's what's happening in the ADHD brain, is we're just burning through it so quickly. So we don't have as much control over our impulsivity or our emotional regulation. And when it comes to executive functioning, it's just more difficult for us to stay focused, pay attention. ADHD brains, it's interesting because they call it a disorder. ADHD is a disorder when it comes to like medical terms. But I don't like that word, because what I have found is there's far more gifts with ADHD than there are, debilitating symptoms.
I see that a lot too. I know a lot of people that are high performers that have, I guess, some version of it. I mean, you call everything ADHD right
Right.
now, well, nowadays. And people even refer to themselves like nobody really has ever like diagnosed that. Like they'll just be talking to me, I have some version of ADHD, I'm sure, because I have all these symptoms.
Right.
But it does, when once you find out something that you like or something that you're good at, it does make you extremely great
Yes.
at that thing. And so I think it's a gift. You got to figure out how to use it correctly. But I think it can be a benefit. And I have parents that DM me too sometimes, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with your kid, I promise. He's just not doing good in school. I was like, but once you figure it out and once he can focus that, like he's gonna kill it in life, I promise. And so like people think that there's something wrong with him.
Well, could we
And
talk about how school is just so, I mean,
it's
school
tough.
was not built for the ADHD brain. I
Well,
mean,
that's why it's mostly boys, right? They thought only boys had it because
right.
they just can't sit there for that long.
Exactly. But you know what else is interesting is only 1/3 of all ADHDers are actually hyperactive. So, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a terrible name, because 2/3 of all ADHDers, whether it's children or adults, they're not hyperactive, but we call it now, we really don't use the term ADD anymore. It all fits under ADHD, because they're either hyperactive or they have hyperarousal. So hyperarousal is, it's like internal hyperactivity. You see this a lot with girls. That's why they're not usually properly diagnosed. It could be trouble sleeping. It could be multiple thoughts at one time. The brain is just always going. And so, neurotypical and neurodivergent, the reason you're neurodivergent is just that you don't have the typical brain. If everybody was walking around with an ADHD brain like us, then society would be created for that brain. There's nothing wrong with our brain. We just learn differently. So the school system's set up for you to sit still, pay attention, wait to be called on, don't fidget, and then use your working memory to answer questions on a test, all the things that ADHDers struggle with. But ADHDers actually, on average, have a higher IQ than the general public. They're very creative. They're out of the box thinkers. They can usually find solutions to problems before others. They're very intuitive, and the hyper focus. When the ADHD brain can get engaged and stay engaged, if you ask an ADHDer, is there anything you can't accomplish? They'll almost always say no, because if they can get engaged and stay engaged, and that's the issue. In school, they can barely get engaged and they can't stay engaged because the material is boring. They're
Yes.
being asked to sit still. ADHDers, this is why like a Montessori school would be good for ADHD children, because they need to be able to get up, walk around, touch things, ask a lot of questions, not be in trouble for interrupting, work in groups because body doubling is a thing for ADHDers. And school really isn't set up that way. It's sit still, stay in your seat, don't talk, and then we're going to test your IQ by giving you tests. It's just not a great environment. So ADHDers typically soar when they get out of school and they can use their mind to create whatever they want in life.
How is ADHD actually diagnosed today? Is
Mm.
there a way? Is there a true test, or is it just questions? Is there a brain scan? Well, like how do you diagnose it?
Well, Dr. Amen is really famous for
Thank you for
doing brain scans, but like the majority of people are not going to be seeing him or his clinic,
Sure.
right? And so usually it's just questions. And I mean, this is where I struggle just with my own practice and having clients come in. They're misdiagnosed quite often. About 50% of the time, my clients come in and they're actually on the spectrum as well, but they either weren't evaluated for that or they were told that they don't have it because there's a lot of overlap. Or ADHDers will commonly be misdiagnosed with depression and anxiety, and that will be treated, and the ADHD is not treated. Where what happens a lot, not always. I mean, you could have anxiety and depression with ADHD, but if you treat the ADHD first, a lot of times the anxiety and depression will go away. But really, most people are just going into a doctor's office, like pediatrician or even a psychiatrist, primary care, and they're being asked a series of questions, and then it's being determined yes or no. The problem with that is the DSM-5, which is what we're at right now, is there.
Explain what DSM is.
Well, it's just the criteria that we use, and it's for everything. It's OCD, it's bipolar,
Okay.
it's any condition that's it's updated. So, we started with DSM-1 and then 2, 3, now we're on 5. So that just means we've updated what we know about the disorder, and now we're using different criteria. And even where we're at now with everything that we know about ADHD, it really focuses primarily on behaviors. And that's a problem because ADHD, especially in women, for example, will many times just be internal, the way they're thinking about things, they're processing information. It's not hyperactive behaviors. So it's missed a lot. It's misdiagnosed in girls, especially. And the other thing that's interesting, the criteria only goes up to age 16. So that means if you're an adult and you go in to be evaluated for ADHD, the questions they're asking you are meant for children instead of adults. And so this is why a lot of times adults will believe that they've grown out of ADHD because they don't match the criteria in the DSM, when in fact, childhood behaviors will just manifest into adult behaviors. So you don't grow out of ADHD, you just learn how to compensate or
Manage it.
rewire
Yeah.
your brain.
I think that's what I kind of did my whole life.
Hmm.
Again, I don't know if it was ADHD or anxiety or
Right.
depression or a mix of all. Like, I have no idea, but definitely a bunch of issues. And that's what I did. I like figured out things to manage it. And that's how I internalized it every single week. I would be like, working out was a big one, kind of got me into working out because I figured
Yes.
out that could suppress my anxiety pretty well. But just with panic attacks and a bunch of other issues, like I couldn't get rid of it 100%. Until later in life, I finally
Yeah.
found, some functional medicine doctors. And so I was able to do a series of things. It wasn't one single thing that helped. It was almost like 3 or 4 things that really
Right.
didn't make it go away completely, but man, 95% better. I wish I would have known, when I was early on in my life would have saved me years of
Right.
suffering for sure.
We just didn't have enough information. And I think we still
Yeah,
don't do a very good job of diagnosing or treating, because everything you're saying really makes a lot of sense to me. That first of all, what a lot of people don't know, because it's like we know that exercise is good for us. We know that
of course.
nutrition is important, but it really does connect here because, like with ADHD, if you do 45 minutes of strenuous exercise, it can have the same benefits in the brain as taking stimulant medication. So you'll see this a lot where you'll have high school athletes that are very active in school, they're working out every day, they're participating in sports. And then when high school's over, they're not really doing that anymore. They've gone on to start their career and they'll feel like their symptoms are now just out of control, or what is going on? Do I have ADHD? Nobody really recognized how beneficial that exercise was to help calm their brain. And then the other thing with nutrition is we're learning that it's gut health and brain health have a huge effect on ADHD because there's a lot of inflammation. There's a lot that goes into controlling the brain and keeping it calm.
My doctor, when he was like, "Hey, we need to go on this anti-inflammatory diet," and I was already eating technically in my mind pretty healthy. I'm like, "Well, I eat good." I was
I
like,
saw what you ate last night, Sean. I was like, felt a little sorry for you. And then I thought he's smart. He's smarter than I am.
"Well, you know what? You know what I figured out with now having functional medicine clinics and being close to doctors and treating a lot of seeing a lot of patients get treated. Everybody's different."
Right.
And just because if one thing works for somebody, it doesn't mean it works for
But
somebody
your
else.
audience should know that you don't eat pizza, and that is like, who can give up pizza, right? But and all joking aside, that is what's hard because people hear something like that, like if that's the answer, you have to give up pizza. They're like, no, thanks.
Yeah, see,
So it's
it
difficult.
was it was affecting my life so much that I would rather do things that made me feel better and I was willing to just because it had been for 25 years. I'm like, whatever I can do to make
Right.
this better, I'm good. I don't care what it is. And so, that again, it wasn't like just the anti-inflammatory diet, but we did a food sensitivity, food allergy, and so like all this stuff that caused inflammation, we just pulled it out.
Mhm.
And it was some of the stuff I was eating a lot of. And so I thought it was bull crap. I'm like thinking in my head, yeah, sure, okay. But the other stuff he said worked that I was doing. So I'm like, I'll try it. I don't, whatever you think. And it really did help a lot. And I'm like, can't believe it. Like and again, I
Yeah.
think every single person's different. And so my wife, she took it and barely sensitive to anything that causes inflammation. And that's why she can eat everything and not feel like crap. So I think there's different people, require different things to make them feel better and to treat
Yes.
whatever the issues are for sure.
I like that you're talking about it that way, though, because I am sensitive for things to just be kind of thrown out online. So, of course, my page is all dedicated to ADHD. So
Sure.
there's a lot of opinions. And so you'll get people that come on and they're really strong with just control your diet, don't go on
That doesn't
medication.
work for everybody.
No, it doesn't. And so if you would have asked me maybe even like 7 years ago, I probably would have said, "Do not put your kids on medication." Like I have clients that are coming into my office and their child's in 4th grade and they've been kicked out of 2 or 3 schools already. They have no friends. They're really struggling and they go on medication. Game changer. They're able to regulate their emotions and stay calm. And then, of course, you have others that really can control it a lot better with diet. But it is important to highlight there are parents out there who have tried taking their kids off of dairy, go gluten-free, no sugar, and it's not making any difference. And so, to your point, everybody's different and treatment for everybody is different. Sometimes treatment is medication. Sometimes treatment is more like what I do, behavioral coaching. It's different for everyone.
And probably a combination of everything,
Yes.
Like your diet definitely number one, that's the easiest thing you can fix. And then number 2, 3, 4, and 5, you like go down all these other paths to try to improve it.
Yes.
But again, yeah, I think everybody's different.
Mhm.
Is there like what role does dopamine play in ADHD?
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. I mean, we are operating off of lower dopamine levels already, so
Okay.
we really are dopamine chasers. Uh, those with ADHD who go untreated, whatever treatment looks like, are 3 to 4 times more likely to be addicted to substances. I see that a lot in my office, especially teenagers. They become very quickly addicted to nicotine, to smoking weed, to alcohol, or worse. And the other thing is we're more prone to accidents as well, just kind of a side note. And so this is why treatment is so important because our brain is scattered and we're looking. Boredom is the most overwhelming, heavy emotion for an ADHDer. They're not just bored, have nothing to do. Teenagers who are bored feel like my life has no meaning. They'll say things that we don't want our kids to say, like, "Oh, I'm going to, hurt myself or something," just because they don't have enough going on in their lives. So this is why, ADHDers are huge risk takers. This is why they make great entrepreneurs. But as teenagers who are just going to school every day and doing homework, it becomes very monotonous. We want to understand that as parents and help our kids because if we're like, just suck it up, just be tough. It's school. Like their brain needs dopamine. It is searching for dopamine.
I've met so many like just crazy successful people that when they were out of high school, big time in drugs, went down that path. But you see them now, they somehow, were able to get clean, or whether it was herself or help or however they were able to do it. Now in their, high 30s, 40s, they're like just destroying life. Like, I mean, and I know, I mean, probably 20 or 30, just so that I could count
Wow.
on the back of my head right now. It's just because I think it's like everyone tries to self-medicate because they don't know there's anything wrong with them.
Right.
So they're like, oh, I've drank alcohol, I can kind of feel a little bit better, and I'm not so
Mhm.
crazy in my mind. And I think that that's how they go down that path. And then it's like with everything else, it's like all or nothing, right? And then
All
so
or
they're
nothing.
they're
Very
like, I'm gonna,
addictive
yeah,
personality.
yeah. So when they figure out that like that's not the path and it ruin their life, and if they can get out of it, then they end up becoming really, really successful. I've known so
Yes.
many of them that was the path, and I think that that's why they got into drugs and alcohol, because they're trying to like technically self-medicate,
Yeah.
and they probably don't know why.
Exactly. They don't know why. They don't know because ADHDers, I've never met someone with ADHD that I've worked with, whether they're 8 or 80, that doesn't struggle with self-esteem and self-confidence. Because by age 10, most ADHDers have heard over 20,000 corrective messages. Why can't you do that? Your sister can do that. Why can't you sit still? Why didn't
Oh,
you
that's a
finish
good
this?
point.
And it really, they start, they're smart. They're comparing themselves constantly. How come that's so easy for them and not for me? Or why can't I just do this? They don't understand their brain. And really, most adults don't understand ADHD brains either. They don't understand what gets an ADHD brain engaged. I'll see this a lot where maybe a child is the ADHDers don't usually do very well in math. It's not all. ADHD is a spectrum, but typically they don't do great in math. So maybe they're struggling in math, they're getting D's, they're not getting their homework done almost ever. And then something happens. There's a big exam coming up, and if they don't pass this exam, they're going to fail out and have to take this class again next year. So something kicks in. It's actually urgency. It's one of these 5 things that engages the ADHD brain, and it hyperfocuses. They study, and the next day they take the exam and they get a B. And then parents and teachers say, "See, you're capable. You can do it. You're just being lazy. You're not applying yourself." And nobody's understanding why their brain engaged. And they'll even ask them, "How come you can't do this all the time?" And they'll say, "I don't know." And they're usually in trouble. So instead of rewarding the child for getting a B, everybody's frustrated with them because, "See, you're capable. You're just not applying yourself." When in reality, that teenager has no idea why their brain was able to sit and study like that when they can't ever do it on the regular basis. Parents don't understand, teachers don't understand, they don't understand. It just breaks them down even more because they don't understand themselves. How come sometimes I'm on fire and other times I cannot get my brain to work?
But society, if the last 50 years, if you don't go to school and you don't get good grades, you're a loser and a failure. Technically, like that's how
Yes.
they treat it. That's how their parents look at it. That's how the teachers look at it. If they can't do what all these other kids are doing, then they're a failure. And it's like far from the truth of like what will happen in the real world. But in the first 18 years, it's really bad. And that's like, hey, you're a loser, you're a failure if you don't get
I'm
good grades in school.
anti-grades,
And
just
you,
so you know. I don't like it at all. I don't
yeah.
like that we're measuring someone's how
It's
likely they are
also,
to be successful based on what grade they're getting in
I
school.
know, or memorizing more. Somebody else can memorize more stuff than him. Like, I don't know if that matters. It definitely doesn't matter when you get out in the real world, everyone. So,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
what does explain executive function? What does that mean?
Well, so executive functioning skills is just the way that we're managing ourselves. So being on time, being organized, being able to keep up with daily responsibilities and duties. And so ADHDers, especially when they start to get into junior high and high school, will really start to struggle more. In fact, right around the time that puberty hits and school is advancing, this is when ADHDers maybe they weren't having problems as a kid. Parents weren't even considering getting them evaluated for anything. And now they're going, "What is wrong with my child?" It's because now they're being expected to keep track of all of their classes and be organized and pay attention to due dates. And there's so much going on. So executive functioning is all of those things, staying on top of getting things done, following through, all of it. And the executive function age until the brain is developed, around 24 or 25, until that point, Dr. Barkley teaches that they're about 3 years behind a neurotypical person. So that means if you have a 12-year-old that you're thinking you should be able to do this and I shouldn't have to remind you, they're really about an age 9. We were talking about this earlier that parents are kind of shoulding all over the place, like you should be able to do this and I shouldn't have to remind you, those kinds of things. But the expectations are unrealistic. So it doesn't have anything to do with their IQ. They could be very smart, but their executive function age, their ability to control their emotions, their impulsivity, stay on top of tasks, not be reminded, take responsibility for themselves, they're at least 3 years behind. And I would argue with boys, it's usually even a little bit more of a gap.
Yeah.
And so we want to meet that child where they're at. If we're constantly asking them, why can't you do this? Why are you always late? Why do I always have to remind you? We're really contributing to the damaged self-esteem that they're already experiencing, instead of finding ways to build them up, give them supports, give them reminders, and meet them where they're at.
I don't Whenever I try to, I guess you call that discipline, right? If they're
Mhm.
yelling at their kids, like, well, you need to be on time. When with my son, I try to work on the skills that will fix it. So I never have to tell him every single day and hey, you know what? This is how we're going to fix it. And I try to work on those skills each week, whatever the
Right,
issue
sure.
is, right? And and he's definitely got some version of ADHD, whatever you would consider.
Yeah.
And no formal diagnosis, but I mean, you can just
Right.
definitely tell. But that's what he gets rewarded is on improving on his skills every week. And so it's been super helpful instead of just saying like me coming home every day and then like yelling at him because he's not doing something. It's like, well, we're going to work on the skill and you're
Mhm.
going to get rewarded if you improve on those skills.
Right.
So it's been pretty helpful that way.
Well, you're a smart parent, right? One of the problems is that if you have an ADHD child, they probably got it from you, right? They got it from one of their parents. And so you have a lot of parents who aren't great at executive functioning skills themselves that are then trying to teach their children. So what that means is you have emotional dysregulation is just as much of an impairment as the distractibility side of ADHD. So you have a lot of parents that are dysregulated themselves. So they are trying to be patient and then they lose their patience and they're yelling at their kids or they're frustrated and they're running late too. And so it can be a little bit extra chaos in that situation where maybe a parent can't figure out how to help their child because they've never been able to really help themselves.
About the parenting and the genetics, is genetic play a big role? Is
Oh,
that where
yes.
most people like,
Mhm.
what are the causes? How do people get it? Is there things that make it worse?
Yes. Absolutely. So it is genetic, and some will argue that it's not. It absolutely is. Can things make it worse? Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think vaccines, personally, I think it can make it worse. Trauma definitely makes ADHD worse. So if you have gone through trauma, the symptoms will be magnified.
That was one of my questions. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I have adults that come to me that say, I probably had ADHD when I was younger. Like I was never diagnosed because they might be my age, I'm almost 50. And so it's like back then and people weren't running out getting an ADHD diagnosis, but they can look back and recognize like, I'm sure I had it. I
Yeah.
struggled in school this way and then that way. But it wasn't really that much of an impairment. And then they had a life situation, a life event where maybe like a close friend of theirs passed away or something like that. And then everything just felt like it became uncontrollable. They're struggling at work, they're struggling in their relationships. So it's not that the trauma caused the ADHD, it's just that it made the symptoms so much worse. But if you are an adult with ADHD, there's a 50% likelihood that any one of your children could have ADHD. And if you're a child with ADHD, then you got it from one parent or the other.
The vaccine thing.
Yes.
Do vaccines cause ADHD?
I mean, I think that between autism and ADHD, I think we know that there's inflammation, there's difficulty processing heavy metals. Most ADHDers have the MTHFR mutated gene. I know I do.
Me
My
and my
kids
wife.
do.
Me and my wife do.
Yes.
We haven't tested my kid, but I'm like 100% sure he has it.
So, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but what I have seen and what I've read, there's at least evidence to whether it's turning something on. I don't know that it's causing it completely, but it's definitely contributing because there's inflammation, and I do think that vaccines are playing a role in this, in
I
neurodivergence, autism, and ADHD.
Yeah, I told you a story about our son. At 1 years old, he was already talking, saying some words, and then we did his 1-year-old shots. We were first time parents, knew nothing about it. You just kind of go off whatever doctor tells you or hospital or whatever. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I guess that's what you do. You don't even ask how many there are in there.
Right.
And he got his shots, had a really, really high fever for like 4 days, and then just didn't talk till he was 4.5, and then started to display kind of like just odd symptoms. And then as a doctor's like, well, he might have autism. And I was like, he seemed pretty good before we gave him all the shots. And so I definitely think, we know now just from our own experience, like you said, turn something on, something happens. And that's why I think some people are okay and some people are not. Like you
Mhm.
said, MTHFR. Like that's why vaccines don't affect everybody, but a
Right.
big portion of the population it does.
Well, because autism, exactly. So, like, a lot of my kids are on the spectrum, and it looks like I'm remarried. Their dad and their family, a lot of them are on the spectrum. So, but I can remember the first child that I had diagnosed with autism. He was the only one, and I didn't know enough about neurodivergence. So he was about 8 or 9 when we had a formal diagnosis done. And by the way, I had different schools test him twice, which don't go to your school to be diagnosed ever, please, because I've never seen a successful situation with any of my clients where they went to the school to be diagnosed. But I was reassured, no, this should have been my first indicator. He tested top in the district, not just in his class. It's like, yeah, that's actually a sign for autism. He's just like genius level intelligence. But he struggled. I remember after he got his vaccines, I remember him in his high chair, just like hitting his head and his tongue sticking out of his mouth. But I can't say that the vaccine caused autism because his dad had autism, their family had autism, but he started behaving in a way that he wasn't before. So that tells
It's
me
kind of how ours
something's
was.
turned on, right? Like that wouldn't have been turned on before because with autism specifically, there is like a toxicity overload that's common for autistic clients or patients that they can't reduce the toxic load in their body, all of the aluminum. In fact, anyone who has autism would benefit from just doing regular detoxes of their body because they can't process things and they hold on to a lot of toxicity.
How do you do that? Like
Well, like
sauna and other, like how do
sauna, yeah, and like, I love pure encapsulation vitamins, and they have a really good GI liver detox that we use. And then, at the biohacking conference that I went to last year, I connected with Root Brands, and I didn't plan to talk about this here, but I will, because people are sending me,
of course.
drinks and gums and all kinds of things, patches, and I never promote anything because I personally don't notice the difference. But with Root Brands, they actually have a patent on it. She's autistic herself, and she's a doctor she worked at Pfizer at one point. She really knows what she's doing. So they created a system that they claim will cure ADHD and autism symptoms. It's all natural. So they have drops that are constantly detoxing your body in a gentle way. They have a lot of anecdotal stories where someone wasn't talking, and 4 months after they did the drops, they were talking. And then to go along with it, they have something called zero-in capsules. So I used to take ADHD medication just because I would be sitting for 12 hours at a time doing a lot of just, work. And zero in puts things back in your body. If you're going to detox and take things out, you want to put the good stuff back in. So I take both of those. I have my entire family on that system, and I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, I remember when this could be a little bit of a coincidence too, and he was probably getting old enough, but I was like, you know what, me and Gentry both take these, and I know he has some version of it, so I started giving him like methylated multivitamin stuff when he was a
Right.
kid, when he was about 4, and then shortly after he started talking, I'm not going to say that that's what did it because he probably would have started talking anyways, but it seemed like it like sped it up really fast. Like he was just doing a lot better in general
Yeah,
once I gave him that. So
that's great.
before they made you feel crazy a little bit, and then now you see all these things coming out about, well, vaccines do cause this, and like they're starting to release all the studies, which is super sad because you got to think about how many
They
kids and stuff
intentionally hid it from us. I mean,
yeah,
it's
and
frustrating. Yeah.
got affected by it for
Hmm.
so long.
Well, I think right now they're saying 1 in 16 males has autism now. I mean, it's probably higher than that, honestly, but that's
Yeah, that's what's like, I guess, diagnosed,
My
really.
kids will
Like,
joke, they're like, "Oh," because a lot of them have autism. "You think everyone has autism." I'm like, "But that's not far off today just because everybody was vaccinated and not now, now we're wising up to that." But autism and ADHD are so much more common than they used to be.
why do you think ADHD's missed in the girl diagnosis?
Because I think that, as I mentioned before with DSM, most of the evaluation questions focus on hyperactivity. So we do a terrible job at evaluating ADHD because most people aren't hyperactive. There,
Most girls definitely,
most girls for sure. So someone who's doing well in school, who's not interrupting, who isn't being disruptive at all, nobody's going to think ADHD. But what's going on the inside? It there are a lot of people, girls and boys, that will work twice as hard for half the reward just to like keep up. There's a lot of masking going on, and girls are better at masking than boys are. So masking is really looking around, figuring out what I think is expected of me, how are people doing things, communicating with each other, and then doing my best to show up that way all the time so that I'm fitting in. So when you have someone who's especially smart that can just kind of keep up in school, or they're really high maskers, willing to work really, really hard, which is painful. They're working twice as hard as the average person just to keep up in school or to even make friends. Then everyone thinks, oh yeah, they're just, there's nothing going on here. But internally, it's doing so much damage. They're in so much pain because it's hard for them, and it doesn't feel easy, or even it doesn't feel like them. And so this is why a lot of ADHDers become habitual people pleasers. They don't learn boundaries. They learn, like, okay, I just want to make you happy. I just want to fit in. And also will experience imposter syndrome. I mean, that's one of the main things I work on with ADHD women is imposter syndrome, because they've been trying so hard to be the person that everybody wants them to be so that they can feel successful.
Why do so many adults go for so long without realizing they have ADHD?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that we didn't have correct information. So, for example, rejection sensitive dysphoria, whenever I talk about that, women just come out of the woodwork. I have that. I didn't know what that was. So they have started to believe they're crazy, or they have anger management issues, or they're just, maybe it's because of my parents getting divorced, or maybe I'm just really sensitive, and they didn't know RSD is part of ADHD. So what that means is we were focusing on executive functioning skills like focus and follow through. And sometimes RSD is one of the only real debilitating symptoms for ADHD. And RSD, or rejection sensitive dysphoria, it falls under that umbrella of emotional dysregulation. So what it is the extreme intensity and emotional reaction to the idea that you've been rejected. And nobody likes to feel rejected, but when you have RSD, it's at an entirely different level. So it's usually perceived rejection. Uh, it can be triggered by teasing, by constructive feedback or criticism, the idea that you failed to meet someone's expectations or you failed to meet your own. And so it really causes a lot of damage in personal or romantic relationships, in the workplace, because it's unpredictable too. It's like one day you could take teasing or a constructive comment, and the next day their boss or even their loved one might just say something to them. For example, my daughter, she was really good at speech and debate. She would always come and get feedback from me on her papers. One day she came in just like she always had, asked me to read something. I read it and I give her a little bit of feedback. She yanks that paper. Forget it. You don't think I'm good at this. Slams the door. That's RSD. It's unpredictable. It comes. And what she hears is, you're no good. Go do it again. You're terrible. And that's not what's happening. And this RSD, I mean, anyone
So they're
who's listening to this,
not able to take constructive criticism.
but sometimes they are. It's feeling rejected. It can be what someone doesn't say. It could be being with a group of women and one person gets a compliment and you don't, and you start spiraling. How come they didn't say anything about me? Do they not like me? Do they not want me here? Am I ugly? I've had clients, I think I mentioned this before when you and I were talking, but I can think of one client specifically recently that she has this business and it's awesome. She's doing great. She has all 5 3.5-star reviews. And she was teaching a course, and somebody who was pretty high maintenance in that class gave her a 3.5-star review. She spiraled so hard, she didn't start the next course when it was supposed to start. I'm coaching with her, and she's telling me, I think I need to get into a different profession. She couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. She's just thinking about this one review. Nobody likes that, but when you have RSD, I mean, I could have been the walking poster child for this when I was in my 20s. It's so painful, it can feel like an internal wound. I felt like I was being clawed from the inside out. And then if you combine that with any type of trauma or abandonment, like my parents were divorced when I was younger, if I had a breakup, oh my goodness, it would just take me out. And so it's most women, when I'm talking about this, they've never heard of it before. And then they think maybe I do have ADHD, because this is just as big a problem. 2/3 of all adults say this is the most impairing symptom they deal with ADHD. It's
Yeah.
huge.
In my 20s, the same thing. There was reviews and like stuff that would happen in my business. I think like the whole business is crumbling down if like one bad thing happened. And
Right.
then I also never felt like I was doing good enough ever.
Yes.
So like no matter what I accomplished, no matter what happened, I'm like, I'm not doing good enough. I'm like comparing myself to Elon Musk. I'm like, he's doing so much. I really was. I was like, I'm
To
not doing
Elon Musk. You
and
see
Steve
how
Jobs.
unreasonable that is,
No, and
right?
Steve Jobs, which is like two geniuses, right? And so I'm like, I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing more. I need to be growing my company. It's like every day I woke up and I thought that. So I no matter what I hit or what goal I hit, even if it was one that I wanted to, I still would wake up the next day and be like, I'm not doing enough. Like there's other people that are beating me. And so I would always feel that way. I
Yeah.
didn't really know the
So painful
like,
though, right? I mean,
it helped, I guess, but like to like always keep striving for something else, but it was also just like mentally draining
but
all
there's
the time.
ways to do that. And that's what I do in behavioral coaching is some people believe, no, I need to feel this way so that I can get where I need to go. And it's like, no, you don't. You can create
Yeah.
motivation without shaming yourself every
Yeah,
day.
I still have the same motivation, but I don't necessarily feel that way every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't affect my whole day, or it doesn't affect me like that. Because that's what I said. It almost like I'm like spiraling in my head that I'm not
Mhm.
doing enough, and I'm like I can't catch up, and like always just overwhelmed or something. It's
Right.
weird.
RSD is huge. I mean, it's emotional dysregulation on steroids, and it's so painful. It really causes problems. Like a lot of ADHD women are struggling in their marriage because they're so sensitive. Why don't you do this for me? Or why did you say that to me? And it can cause huge arguments. And it's such a big thing when RSD is triggered that we refer to it as an episode. Because when you're in the middle of an RSD episode, the mistake that parents will make, or even a spouse, is like, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. What are you upset about? You cannot do that in the middle of an episode. That person needs to go work through it on their own. They're not rational enough. I'll use a scale 1 through 10, like how overstimulated are you? And if you're over a 5, no, we don't work on the model that I've taught to manage your thoughts. You don't try to work the situation out. You have to get below a 5 to even be able to have the conversation. So many parents will tell their kids like, "Get back here. You don't talk to me that way." You cannot work with someone in the middle of an episode. They have to go take care of it on their own, and then you can work through it later. Even an apology is not going to help at that moment. It's just going to trigger more and more because they're not doing it on purpose. It is their wiring, but they're not hearing you. They're not hearing apologies as apologies. All they're experiencing in that moment is rejection.
I'll have to get Gentry to listen to this part. She but she tells me, she's like, I thank you for not picking on me whenever I'm like overstimulated, like just falling off the deep end. She's like, you don't keep going and going and going. I
Mhm.
just leave her alone, and
That's what she
6
needs.
hours later, next day, she's good.
Well, we just need time to work through our thoughts because it feels very real.
Yeah,
And
when she
then
gets overwhelmed, she's
what
like,
I will say is that most ADHDers, once they're kind of coming down from this episode, there's so much shame because they recognize that their reaction was
freaked out
much bigger
over.
than the
Yeah.
situation warranted. And now some people can hold it in and they're just spiraling inside, but it's still embarrassing to them because they either shut down or they didn't show up with the group or whatever. But a lot of people will actually lash out, yell, scream. In fact, this isn't as common, but some of my clients will even say they don't even remember what they said in the middle of an episode. They just saw red. So there's a lot of shame associated with that because it's the impulsive part of ADHD. They literally feel like they don't have control over themselves when an episode flares.
Hey everyone, real quick, I just want to let you know this podcast is 100% independent. No ads, no sponsors, just real. If you're finding value in whatever we're doing here, the biggest help that you can give us is hitting subscribe and sharing this with someone who you think needs to hear it or someone that it will provide value to. That's how we continue to grow. And if you did that, I would really appreciate it. So what about medications? What are some of the common medications? I'm sure people have heard like Adderall or
Right.
was specifically supposed to be used. Everybody used it for something else, but
Right,
what are the
exactly.
other medications that are supposed to treat
Well, the
ADHD?
first line of defense is stimulant medications. And so everything is either Ritalin based or it's Adderall based. So more people respond positively to Adderall based medication than Ritalin. So, but back to my earlier example of you're just burning through that molecule in your brain
Yeah.
so quickly. That's why we have so many different medications because it's, like everybody responds differently. So they've made a lot of different stimulants. One of my favorites is a newer medication called Dianavel. It's dissolvable on your tongue, tastes good. But here's the interesting thing about medication. You'll have so many people say, "Oh, well, what do you take and how much do you take?" It's like that question has no, there's no point to ask that because my 90-pound niece takes 3 times more medication than I did. It's not based off of your age, your weight, your gender, any of that. It's based off of your absorption rate. So some people can only handle 10 milligrams and some people can handle 65. My daughter was taking 45 milligrams 3 times a day. And some people will say, whoa, that's way too much because most doctors won't give you more than 65 or 75, depending on the medication. The majority of doctors won't do that. What I learned from Dr. Dodson, and he educated me and showed me this, that the FDA came out in 2005 and said, this isn't the max dose. This is just as high as we've tested. So we had to fight the pharmacy and the insurance to allow her to take that much because less than that wasn't doing much for her. So that's another problem that we encounter is that some people are at their max dose and it's not helping them as much as it could. And doctors are scared to give them more than that. But it's based on absorption rate. So some people burn through that medication in a couple hours and others are really sensitive to it. And 10 milligrams will last them all day. You also have short acting and long acting. So you have Dianavels in your system for 18 hours, where Adderall, if you do short acting, like immediate release, it wears off in like 4 or 5 hours. So stimulant medication is really the best to treat ADHD. There's a lot out there. Dr. Dodson's favorite was Vyvanse. He would use that. That's what my sister was on to treat her binge eating disorder as well. And then when it comes to RSD, if you're working with a specialist, they will know to bring this up. There's 2 medications that treat RSD that are not stimulants. It's either guanfacine or clonidine. Now, these were meant to be blood pressure medications. Dr. Dodson says they don't work very well at all for blood pressure, but they just kind of happened upon recognizing that it treated RSD. So they're not meant to be taken together. It's one or the other.
What's the reason that it works for
Yeah,
the symptoms?
it helps to control impulsivity. It reduces the sensitivity of RSD. It also will help many people sleep better, and it can reduce the multiple thoughts at one time.
Just like calms you down a little bit.
That's right. So you can take it with your stimulant medication. You're meant to try one for about a week, and then if you're not noticing any benefits, try the other because about 30 to 35% of people will respond positively to guanfacine, 30 to 35 will respond to clonidine, and then about 30% of people will not respond to either. But it has a pretty good, like a lot of my clients get a lot of benefit from that. I personally take clonidine, and it's just a small amount too. For me, it's like 1.5 pills is the magic number. The most common side effect is like being tired. So you have to experiment with it and make sure you don't have any side effects. You can go from 1 milligram to 2. And then the most I really ever see anyone on is like 3 milligrams. So it's very mild. People who are kind of anti-medication, if their child's really struggling, will eventually try guanfacine or clonidine because it's so mild. So that really is the best combination for most ADHDers is a stimulant medication, if they're going to do medication, and then either guanfacine or clonidine.
Is that like the last line of defense? Like, so you do diet, you try all these other
Right.
things you can do naturally, exercise,
Mhm.
and then
And those things take a long time. So I absolutely agree that nutrition and all of these things should be looked at. But I'm big into mitochondria and healing mitochondria, but that can take like 18 months or more. And so if your child's really struggling, they can't sit still, or they don't have a lot of friends, or they're not focusing at school, or they're even having impulsive behaviors and behavioral issues, diet for most of my clients is something to be doing long term, but immediately stimulant medication, it's in and out of your system in the same day, is probably going to be a better treatment in the short term.
Outside of the medication, what are the most like powerful lifestyle changes that you can do to treat any one of these things?
Yeah, I mean, exercise, sunlight in the morning, right? Even if they're just going on a walk, get your kids involved in a sport, go walking with them in the morning. I mean, I know like my mother, they had tennis courts in their backyard, but she started just waking up even earlier and playing tennis with my brother every morning. I go on walks with my daughter, just have to get up a little bit earlier and do that with her just to get them outside in the sun. Vitamins, a gentle detox. And then, of course, I think what I do is probably the most important thing, which is ADHD behavioral coaching, teaching them about their brain. We have a very specific acronym to help us remember what are the 5 things that gets the brain engaged. So if you have a child who doesn't understand those things and they're just trying to show up like a neurotypical person, turn their brain on just because something's important, follow through and get things done, they're going to feel terrible about themselves because that's not how their brain works. So it's really important that we're giving adults and children education on their brain so they recognize they're not broken.
What's the 5 things?
So I created my own acronym. It's WIRED to help us remember. So it's wants, which would be like anything you're passionate about, anything you really want in life that fulfills you. Interest, anything you're interested in. Rivalry, which is like competition or challenge. You can't do that. Most ADHDers are like, you want to bet. Emergency, which is also like urgency. So this is why, like, if the ADHD child has a project due all week, they don't do it. And then
Jump
10
on it
o'clock
the
the
night
night
before.
before, they're like, and actually, I've noticed this in my own, like if I have a keynote or something coming up, if I get myself to work on it the week before, I'll still usually revamp everything the night before. And my hyper-focused brain is better at creating that presentation than when I'm not
I
hyper-focused.
kind of do that too.
Yeah,
Like there's
that's when
certain
I do
days
better
I
work.
just I can't prepare for something, and then certain days like I can like really lock in and figure it
It's
out.
the hyper focus. So this is why procrastination isn't always bad. When I'm working with my clients, I'm helping them create their own owner's manual for their brain because ADHD is a spectrum. We understand it. We know how it works, but each person is different. And so parents get really frustrated with their kids for procrastinating. Sure, we want to teach them good habits, but there are times that when I do things in hyper focus because it's urgent, it's the night before, it feels like it's an emergency, I will do a better job. And so you want to know that about your brain. And then the last one is different or novelty. So one of those 5 things has to be engaged for the ADHD brain to really turn on and get in gear. And if one of those things isn't engaged, then the brain almost doesn't work. You know, when I'm working with younger children, I'll explain to them, like, if your brain had buttons, your buttons are different than a neurotypical brain. So the school system doesn't understand this. So they're asking them to, like, if a child is asked to write on something that they could care less about, they're going to drag their feet and it's probably going to be like a D or a C paper. But if the child can write on something that interests them, then they're going to have an A+ paper. So it's not that they're not smart enough. It's not that they're not applying themselves. It's that they're bored out of their minds. And if we can engage one of those 5 things, they can go out there and accomplish anything. They could get good grades. I mean, it's amazing what ADHDers can do once they're interested in something or they feel some kind of competition. I mean, they can do twice as much work in the same amount of time, and they can do a really, really good job. But if the adults in their lives don't understand that, they're constantly trying to get their child to do things and operate the way a neurotypical person does, and their brain doesn't work that way.
Back to the nutrition thing, how do you think ultra processed food affects someone with ADHD?
Terrible. Terrible. Yeah, I mean, I think that it contributes to that toxic overload. I think it's so bad for their brain and for their gut. It will, in my opinion, really increase symptoms of ADHD.
Yeah, I think I mean, we know now that it's bad for everybody, but
It's worse today, though, than it was when we were younger, even.
I
Don't you
kind of
think
feel
so?
like that. I remember when I was younger, I mean, that's what made me actually start eating good early on was if I did eat like really processed food or just, high sugar food, I would just feel more anxiety, or it wouldn't be like right away. It would just be like the next day or later that day or something
Right.
like that. And so I kind of self taught my like self to just eat semi healthy, right? And I would just eat less of those foods that made me feel like that.
It's so hard. Even with my children, I'm always sending them things. Most of my kids are adults now, but I'm constantly sending them information, and they can be really lazy about that. And, you look at the chemicals that they're allowed to put in foods now and how highly addictive they are. And not only that, but most neurodivergent individuals are lacking like nutrients and real nutrition too, like that their body isn't getting enough of that. They're deficient. So it really is a big deal. I'm constantly trying to show my family how to eat foods that were that are not processed, that we can just take right from the ground, right?
And
Oh,
then now you hear about them banning artificial colors and food dyes, not everything, but how all these, well, whether they knew it or not before, you now see all the information come to light where it's really affecting people as far as like the food dyes. I mean, poison pretty much, or like too
yes.
high amounts in certain foods.
Right. It's all of it too. It's just like everything, the toxic chemicals too that we're cleaning with and using in our homes. I think that there is a toxic overload that is definitely contributing to.
Are there common nutrient deficiencies? Like, which ones are there that, like, would you see if somebody went and got, nutrient tests? Like, which ones would
Mhm.
show up, do you think?
Yeah, so it's commonly vitamin D, definitely folate because of the MTHFR,
That's what helped me a
and
lot
then
too.
they put the folic acid in a lot of the processed foods, which is damaging if you need folate, because you can have toxic overload of that. Your body's not processing it. My kids specifically, they're on every night vitamin B, vitamin D. Um, I actually have them take iron because they don't eat like they should be eating, like I'm trying to assist them with that. It's hard as they get older. And let's see, I definitely have them take magnesium because I believe you need to have magnesium for your D to work and D for your magnesium to work. Most ADHDers really struggle with sleep. And so I think that that is just nutrition deficiency as well. But I mean, not all, but almost all of my ADHD clients struggle because their circadian rhythm is actually off. This is a real thing for ADHDers. When the sun starts to go down, their brain gets a burst of energy. So when everyone else is starting to wind down for the night, they're wide awake. I could be dead tired all day long. And then right around 7, 8 o'clock, I'm like wired, even though all I've been thinking about all day is going to sleep. So ADHDers have a hard time calming down and getting to bed. There's also like we refer to it as like revenge bedtime routine where we want the dopamine. Everyone else is going to sleep. Now I finally have time to do whatever I want. It's nighttime. ADHDers just usually are night owls and love nighttime, but they struggle falling asleep and they struggle staying asleep. And I think a lot of that, I mean, some of it's racing thoughts and things like that, but it's also nutrition deficiency. So I'm really focusing on magnesium, vitamin D, things that are helping. I've even used inositol powder for my children to help them, stay asleep.
Yeah, I struggled with that early on,
Mhm.
not so much anymore.
Because I
But
think it's
I
nutrition
yeah,
deficiency, I
and then
really
I've
do.
I've I've pretty much got everything so dialed in. I mean, I was super low on vitamin D when we finally actually did testing and
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
But I think all of those things combined, like the, anti-inflammatory tests, like fixing all the nutrient deficiencies, fixing the methylation process, like all that stuff together, like I'm pretty good now. Like I don't, but in my 20s and early 30s, it was terrible. Same thing. And then I'd stay up
Yes.
all night just like thinking about like what I need to do the next day, and then what is like again, like I'm not doing enough. Like I didn't do enough today. I need to do more tomorrow. So that's what would keep me up. Or
Well,
just
and the
like worrying about the world falling apart even though nothing's happening.
Exactly, exactly. So that's where I feel like having some kind of self-help, like for my clients, it's obviously behavioral coaching, but learning how to manage those thoughts and calm them down in addition to nutrition. Because I was going to just comment on the teenage diet today. As a parent, you cannot control kids can drive at school, they're selling soda and chips for lunch. I mean, the teenage diet is like Takis or hot Cheetos and soda. That's what they're eating. They're going to Circle K and they're buying junk food, and it's so bad for them. And my son's a type 1 diabetic, and he was so angry that he had diabetes. He just rebelled against any of the instruction that he got. And so it's like, you can't force a 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old to eat the way that you want them to eat. And it takes a while and maturity for them. They have to come to their own understanding. It has to be their idea. They've suffered enough that they decide to start taking care of themselves. Those were difficult times, but I feel like with some of my teenagers now, they know I do this for a living. We have regular family nights. I sit down and show them videos. I send them reels. They don't care. They just want to eat what tastes good. It's like, I wish you guys could see how damaging this is. But as a teenager, they're like, I don't care. I
I'm
just want to
trying
eat hot Cheetos.
I'm trying to work as much as I can with my kid, like instilling all that stuff in him, and he's pretty good. But hopefully, when he gets older, he'll just the routine of doing it so long, maybe he'll be
Right.
at least aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens.
Yes.
Do you think with modern technology and just so much stimulation they can get nowadays, do you think that's causing more or worse symptoms of ADHD?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I see that. Most parents will say that their child's behavior is worse once they've been on screens, that it creates more tantrums, more meltdowns, more defiant behavior. So I definitely think that that's a problem.
What about social media when a teenager? How does that affect someone with ADHD?
So I'm pretty anti-social media for kids. This might sound extreme, but my kids weren't allowed to have it until they're 18.
Okay.
I let them like watch videos on YouTube when they got a little bit older, like 16 years old, but monitored. But social media is so damaging because, especially for ADHDers are run by their emotions, and so when they're up, but when they're down, and we're constantly having this influx of emotions all day long, which just that by itself can create a lot of added irritability just because we're so up and down. But because they are suffering with RSD and they're so emotional, when you get on social media without even realizing it, 95% of people who are going to, let's say, Instagram, for example, which is where teenagers are, or TikTok, they're going there to compare themselves to people who are better than them or doing better than them. They don't realize it, but that's what they're doing. So everything is about how many likes they're getting, what are people doing, and all they're really experiencing is things that other people have that they don't have, parties that they weren't invited to, and they don't get as many likes as somebody else. So it's so damaging to an already very fragile self-esteem. So my kids would always complain, everybody else has it. It's not fair. This is how we communicate. I'm like, I know how fragile you are emotionally. Like I wouldn't say this exactly to them, but there is no way. You're not even handling high school very well. The last thing I'm going to do is have you posting pictures on the internet and not be getting the amount of likes that you want or having somebody make a negative comment. My daughter, one of my daughters, was just bouncing around, feeling so good about herself. And somebody made, like for a couple of years, she just like, I thought, wow, she just has this like confidence about her that's amazing. And then somebody made a comment, another girl at school, about her weight, and she'd been putting on a little bit of weight. I couldn't believe how much that took her out. And this is just somebody saying it behind her back at school. She went into like kind of a depression. It was bad. And it lasted about a year and a half. It all started with that comment. Like she had never considered that people saw her that way. And that was just somebody at school. I can't even imagine how she would have done with social media. So I am totally against social media. And the other thing I'll say is that teenagers, it is true that they communicate through Snapchat, and that's the worst one. And so a lot of parents will give in and give their kids Snapchat because they don't ask for each other's phone numbers anymore. They ask for their Snap. I do not care. It is not worth it to me. I will give them extra privileges. I will find ways to compensate because it is hard as a child that literally everybody else has Snapchat except for them. 8-year-olds are being given Snapchat. It's
Yeah, I'm not
crazy.
familiar with the way the Snapchat works. I mean,
Oh,
I'm familiar with almost every other one, but I don't understand.
messages disappear.
I knew that,
Yeah,
but
right. So right now it's the number one app where kids are selling drugs to each other and also sending naked pictures. So it's parents can't monitor that. So we have a lot of like bark, and we have
gotcha.
different ways to monitor what our kids are doing and who they're talking to because there's a lot of situations out there. You can't monitor Snapchat at all. messages disappear. Kids feel like they're safe because they can send a picture and it disappears, but people are snapshotting it and sending it to their friends.
Screenshots, yeah.
And also, they all turn on their locations. So you can see where anybody is. This means strangers, people that they're giving like they could be playing video games with someone, give them their snap, and now that person knows where they live. They know where they are. They want to be able to see how cool they are and how awesome their life is. You can see where they're going all day long. There's no privacy. And there's a lot of other things. They used to have like after dark, there was like pornographic material on there, but parents can't monitor their child's activity. Yeah, it's a problem.
There's a lot of good because, with the amount of access to information that you have now, which is like the amazing part, but
Mhm.
I think there's always a downside to everything. I mean, I think when you're younger, it looks like on social media that like every 20-year-old's a millionaire and drives a Lamborghini, and it's like
Right.
that's
It's a
they,
problem.
yeah, that's where it's really tough for a younger kid not knowing like how hard it really is to be really successful, and you have to work hard at it. And again, there's probably like one in a million people that can has something happen where they do blow up like that, but the majority of people, they just end up comparing themselves like, I'm not doing good enough.
Right.
I couldn't believe if that was around when I was a kid, it would have been a struggle.
I'm so glad it wasn't because I think it is. And also, this generation of kids now, a lot of them don't know how to be, I mean, everything's instant gratification now, right? So they don't know how to be patient or just put in the time. It's like if they don't see the fruits of their labor after a few months, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to quit. It's not
Yeah.
fulfilling," that kind of thing.
But the good side is like there's so much access to information. Like you could learn anything. You like none of that was available before.
Right.
And then also, just the way that they can like reach out to mentor. I mean, like the access to people, the access to information is so crazy. So I think that's the good side for sure. And again, like there's always some bad when things are that popular, right?
Right. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, the reason I have such a successful business is because I'm able to be online and reach people outside of the United States. I get to even teach internationally, the people in Sweden and then the Netherlands and the UK. I love the internet that it can reach people and give them good information. I just think it's so damaging for our teenagers.
Yeah, when I was younger, I was lived in a small town, but I didn't know anything outside of my small town. So I think having the access to the information and like seeing that there was like other people that were similar to me that were like outside of my town, that would have been a good thing.
Hmm.
So I do think it's a positive thing on the like information side, just because it was so like you have to go to school, you have to go to college, then you have to get a job, and then you like needed to learn something or from someone. And then now
Right.
there's just so much. I mean, you can learn anything that you want between YouTube and ChatGPT. Like you could literally figure out how to do anything.
It's awesome. I mean, if you want, honestly, the real problem is that we don't have enough parents just monitoring it
Yeah,
correctly.
it comes
Uh,
down to a parenting
a
problem.
lot of
Yeah,
parents today, I'll see them even writing online, like, "I'm not gonna check my child's phone until they give me reason not to." I'm like, or give me a reason to, and it's like, the problem is there's so much temptation there that the most well-behaved child could be lured into something, and so I personally don't think that's the right approach, and it is challenging. I mean, I will say that, my kids, their friends got cell phones at age 12 or younger, and so they were really upset that they couldn't have one, or, all of their friends were on Snapchat, and so every parent can make the decision that's best for them. I'm not meaning to judge individually, but I do think that if parents educated themselves on what was really going on, I mean, I had the benefit of coaching teenagers, and so they were telling me their deepest secrets that they're sneaking out of the house and talking to older men and getting on online dating sites, lying about their age, and then snapping these men all the time, staying up at night, and when all their friends went to bed, feeling totally depressed and crying at 3 in the morning, and then creating stories and telling everybody about it on TikTok. Their parents had no idea, and they probably would have been shocked to hear these things. Parents just don't know or understand, I think, sometimes the temptation, and all the other kids are doing it. So if we were just better better at monitoring our child's activity, the apps that they have, making it more age appropriate. The problem with Snapchat is it's really an adult app, but they put all kinds of like fun filters in there and they add all of these things that lure children in. And so this is why kids are using it. But I don't think kids should be using Snapchat at all.
If someone listening has ADHD and it feels like it held them back in life, what are some things they can start doing to design their life to, benefit from ADHD?
This is a great question because there are a lot of people that will say, I love that I have ADHD. It feels like a superpower. But there are more people that say ADHD has ruined my life. I hate that I have ADHD. And almost a little offended that we might say, I love that I have ADHD. Please don't ever take it away from me. And so I understand that. Like people have had difficult times. They feel like their ADHD has caused emotional dysregulation, so much so that they can't keep a job. They can't wake up and be responsible. They blame it all on their ADHD. And so I think the first thing I do with my clients is I help them understand this has nothing to do with your personality or what you're capable of. This is just a wiring issue that nobody ever taught you about. And when you can separate these two and say, oh, it's not that I'm broken. It's not that I chose to do these things, because a lot of this is just repeated messaging. You can't do this, you can't do that. And so they're broken because they have adopted that identity now. And the difference between my coaching and most ADHD coaches is most ADHD coaches will be executive functioning coaches, which is it's needed, right? Like how to help become more organized and stay on task and processes. But most ADHDers, if you talk to them, they'll say that they have absorbed podcasts and books and all kinds of different things that they've heard or courses they've participated in, and it hasn't helped them really make that transformation. And it's because I believe everything starts at an emotional regulation level. If you can change your identity and the way that you see yourself and all of this conditioning that you haven't been able to, other people can and I can't, then you can start being more consistent in life. One of the main reasons that ADHDers feel so bad about themselves is because they haven't been able to be consistent. Because if you think about like self-confidence and how you feel about yourself and the way you're showing up, you have to be pretty consistent in life. People have to be able to count on you. You see things through, you follow through. And ADHDers usually, without working on themselves, are pretty terrible at that. So when it comes to helping adult ADHD clients who are feeling bad about themselves and they can't show up or be consistent, I educate them on what RSD is. I teach them that it's their wiring, not their personality. And then we start with emotional regulation. What is their self-confidence? Why is it that way? How can they let go of the past and kind of clean slate moving forward? It's interesting because really consistency and follow through takes care of itself when they see themselves differently.
Yeah, and then also you get self-confidence by just not breaking promises to yourself
Keeping
anymore.
commitments to
Yeah,
yourself.
and then once you start doing that, you're like, "Wait a second. Like, I am gonna do this. I can do this." And so I tell people that all the time. For parents listening and they may think their kid has ADHD, what should they be doing to help their kid,
Right.
like, flourish, I guess, if they truly think that they have something or diagnosed with ADHD?
Right. Again, like, I think it's really important that they all understand RSD because most parents aren't managing that very well. Their kids having meltdowns, they're getting really offended, and so they lash out in behaviors, and so parents, they don't tolerate that, or their kids getting punished, and so. Sitting down and explaining what RSD is and then working with your child. So, for example, my one daughter, she really struggled with RSD the most. And so for a time, she would yell at me, I hate you. So I'd sit down with her and say, you're not allowed to say things like that, but I'll meet you where you're at. We'll work on this together. So I wouldn't yell at her or say, get back here, young lady, because she slammed a door. Because she didn't say, I hate you. Like, I could see that she was working on this. She would always come out of her room 30 minutes later and apologize. So I had to learn to manage my own expectations and my own emotional regulation, like meet them where they're at, teach them about what's going on, and then you work together to overcome this. Instead of just expecting them to be able to manage their impulsivity, they don't understand their brain. They have very little control over it. learn about RSD, learn about what helps an RSD episode, and then teach them about it and work on it together. We want to see progress in baby steps. Dr. Dodson tells a story about, he talks about back in the day, long ago, when ADHD medication wasn't as well known, and a lot of people figured out how to be very successful, even with a lot of impairing ADHD symptoms. He said they all had one thing in common: people who weren't getting treatment, they didn't have medication, and it was that they all had a person in their lives that was their cheerleader, that instead of beating them down and why can't you do this and what's wrong with you, they said things like, you know what? If you're not being successful at this, it's not for lack of trying. I know you're trying as hard as anyone could. And so whatever's going on, we're going to figure this out together. I'm here for you. I am going to help you get where you want to go because I see you. You're doing a great job. And having that cheerleader in your life who believes in you. ADHDers is so interesting. So for example, like I'll go to an IEP meeting for an ADHDer, and it's like divided in half. These teachers all talk about how the child's doing, and it's like they're terrible in class, they don't sit still, they don't listen, they don't finish their work. And then these teachers are giving commentary like, they're awesome. We have this great relationship. I have no problems with this child in class. It's like, why? Why such a difference? Because ADHDers really respond to pleasing people, but people who see them for who they want to be. So when it comes to, like, you could have an ADHD child who's just like total, just like, I don't know, hyperactive, being kind of a menace in class, and you give them some kind of leadership responsibility, line leader, take this to the office for me. I need you to be in charge of this thing. All of a sudden, they're very best behaved in class. So learning to work with an ADHD brain, what motivates their brain, what helps them feel the part of being responsible, that's what it is. Show them who they could be, speak to that person. Most adults are just pointing out everything the ADHD child is doing wrong. We know that science says that for every one critical remark, you should be giving 5 positive remarks. Even if it's like, pick up your shoes or go do this thing. 5 positive remarks. I'm so proud of you. You did this great. And I go and educate in the schools. I talk to teachers and admin, and I'll tell them, like, if that child's really misbehaving, sometimes it's hard for us to just want to compliment them, but that's how you manage their behavior. So even if they've been terrible, but you notice, oh, they stayed in their seat for 30 seconds longer than they normally do, tell them. That's what changes behavior, not constantly telling them what they're doing wrong.
Hey, everyone, real quick, I just want to let you know this podcast is 100% independent. No ads, no sponsors, just real. If you're finding value in whatever we're doing here, the biggest help that you can give us is hitting subscribe and sharing this with someone who you think needs to hear it or someone that it will provide value to. That's how we continue to grow. And if you did that, I would really appreciate it. What are some of the biggest myths about ADHD that you that are out there maybe on the internet?
Yes. One, that you grow out of it, right? Like, I used to have ADHD, but I don't anymore. Is a huge myth. That ADHDers will get addicted to ADHD medication. The bigger problem that ADHDers have is that they forget to take their medication. I think when they did research, they showed that most ADHDers weren't refilling their prescription by month 3 or 4. They just forget. You can become addicted to ADHD medication, but it's usually people who are already abusing drugs or that don't have ADHD, because ADHD medication doesn't create like this euphoric feeling. In fact, I only knew my medication was working because I would look back on my day and recognize, oh, I got all these things done that normally I don't get done in a day. So I think, and also that ADHD is an impairment of just follow through and distractibility, that some and a large majority of ADHDers, their only impairment will mostly be emotional dysregulation. And like I said earlier, that you're going to fix executive functioning habits by just working on processes. That actually has to come later. If you don't change the mindset, they will always self-sabotage in their behavior. You have to change the way that they feel about themselves, the way that they regulate their impulsivity, and what they believe they're capable of, if you're going to be able to fix the executive function deficits.
If you could give one message to someone with ADHD who feels like their brain works against them, what would you tell them? What would you want them to know?
That you're not stuck like this, that it's it only feels that way because you haven't been given the right information and tools. School, the world we live in is not set up for the ADHD brain, but when you understand your brain, you'll be able to accomplish anything you put your mind to.
Turn it into the superpower.
Absolutely. This is why we make great entrepreneurs, because we're risk takers. We have vision. We're usually very stubborn about something that we set our minds to, and the other thing that I have found is that it's true that we do deal with debilitating symptoms. I mean, it was really causing a lot of havoc in my life in my 20s. And so because we're so all or nothing, you really do have to work through the things that are holding you back, the debilitating symptoms, for all of the gifts to rise to the surface. And so that's why working on the emotional regulation is so important, because once you work through those things, really all of the gifts just rise. And it's like, wow, I didn't know what I was capable of.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people just maybe don't realize that that's what's wrong with them. And so they end up drugs and alcohol is the thing that
Exactly.
makes them feel better, and then they're off on the deep end, which is actually going to make it worse.
Exactly.
So there are tools out there if they do want to get a hold of you, or for your coaching or your help or advice. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, so I can be found on social media. So on Facebook and YouTube, I'm Jheri South, and on Instagram, I'm Ms. like MS Jheri South. But also, I have a website, jherisouth.com, and so I offer consults for people that free consults if they want to learn more about the program. So I have group cohorts, and I also offer one-on-one coaching, where I'm implementing both a very specific rapid reframe response model to help with emotional regulation. And by the way, a lot of my clients have been in therapy for years, and this is the first thing that helped them. So ADHDers are very visual learners. They need systems and processes that are tangible. So that's what I provide. And then also I bring in everything that we know to be true about the ADHD brain and incorporate that all together. So that's what I offer ADHD tests. I can't formally diagnose someone, but I do have a very good ADHD evaluation there. Also RSD, I offer a free webinar on that. So there's a lot of resources, school IEP and 504 plan information. All of that can be found on my website.
Okay, awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on. I think it's going to help a ton of people and answer a lot of questions that either maybe they didn't know they had it, or, a friend or a family member or even a child. It'll help them out. So hopefully it'll point them in the right direction.
I hope so. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is I'm really trying to be the person that I was looking for when my children were struggling that I didn't know that I needed.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you for coming on.
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.